Okay, thank you everybody. This is the second talk of today and the last talk of the workshop. So I'd like to thank you all for being here. And I'm very happy to introduce Rui Prezado, who's going to talk to us about change of base for generalized multi-categories. So please, Rui.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryce and team, for organizing the workshop and for inviting me to present the work. Here I'm going to talk about some notions of change of base for generalized multi-categories. And this is joint work with my former PhD advisor, Fernando Lucatelli Nunes. And this talk is based entirely on the paper, generalized multi-categories, descent, change of base, and embedding is a title. And before I get into the multicategorical stuff, I'd like to first talk about the original motivation behind our development of these what we consider tools for our problem. So the background is that there's this result by Lucatelli Nunes and independently also shown by Cottrell, Fuji, and Power, that if we have a Cartesian monadic category with coproducts, pullbacks, and coproducts distribute over the pullbacks, that suitable means, we have an adjunction between categories enriched in V and categories internal to V. And under a few more assumptions, we can even say that the left adjoint is fully faithful. This means that under certain situations, you can view internal categories with a discrete object of objects, essentially as enriched categories over V. It's important that V is Cartesian because we need the tensor product to act like the products, so that it acts like have the pullbacks, and we use the products as a proxy as pullbacks in some technical sense, but it doesn't really matter. The proof of this result that I'm going to share can be outlined as follows. We have an adjunction between sets and this category V, and this will induce not quite an adjunction because this lives in a double category. This is a conjunction between this double category or equipment of V matrices and this equipment of spans in V. And it's a well-known fact that enriched categories are essentially monads in this bicategory, and internal categories are monads in this equipment, in this bicategory. And by simply applying that monad functor, essentially, that takes these double categories to categories, we obtain an actual adjunction between the enriched categories and internal categories. And Fernando Lucatelli was originally interested in this because we understand descent theory in internal categories, and we wanted to, and if we had a way to view enriched categories as internal categories, we can also take such results from the internal case, such descent results from the internal case to the enriched case. And our motivation is essentially similar. Can we obtain a similar result? We would like to obtain a similar result for generalized multi-categories because previously we studied the descent theory for generalized internal multi-categories, and but our original goal was to study the enriched multi-categories. and it would be useful for us because I'll show why later, but it would be helpful to see this as a change of base adjunction in the same sense that this is a change of base between monads in certain double categories or equipments. Okay, so I'm not sure how much people know about multicategories, so I'll begin with the very simple basics. I'll talk about the example of vector spaces and multilinear maps. So if we have a list V of vector spaces and another vector space W, a multilinear map from the list to the vector space is a function on the Cartesian product of the lists with values in W, which is linear in its components. And if we have such a linear map, when the list is of length 1, it's obviously a linear map, so we have identities. And if we have another list of multilinear maps G, then we can compose them by considering this function. And we can prove that this defines a multilinear map by flattening the list of lists that we obtain from this. And if you try to write down the axioms for associativity and identity, it becomes very unwieldy because there are lots of indices to keep track of. But fortunately, we can simplify the description of the axioms of associativity and identity by considering the free monoid monad. So as I said, it's the composition satisfies associativity and identity laws, and they form a multi-category. But what I want to get at is that if we have a free monoid on a set, we define the X start with a free monoid generated by a set, and we let a multi-category consists of a set and zero of objects. And we have a span, which is a pair of functions where the common domain is the set of multimorphisms. D1 gives us the domain, which is going to be a list of objects, and the codomain is going to be a single object. There's going to be a function which gives us the units that from objects to multimorphisms, and a composition function which where this M2 is essentially the pairs of where you have one multimorphism here and a list of multimorphisms such that you can compose the multimorphism with the list of multimorphisms. And the idea is that we can obtain more general, multi-categories, generalized categories by allowing the domain to be a finite list of objects. And the idea is that by abstracting what the domain can look like, the shape of the domain, we can get other notions of generalized multi-category. And this shape is, these shapes are modeled essentially by suitable monads. I'll explain what suitable is later. I'm going to call it a setting for generalized multi-categories. This was already accomplished, this kind of work, but let me first talk about the cases we were interested in, which are the internal generalized multi-categories and the enriched generalized multi-categories. But before that, I wanted to give another example of an enriched case, so to keep in mind that we are interested in understanding the descent theory of, which was topological spaces. If we have an ultrafilter monad U on set, the ultrafilter monad, then an observation of Michael Varr from 1970 shows that any topological space is completely characterized by its underlying sets by a convergence relation that relates an ultrafilter to a point whenever the ultrafilter converges to that point. And this convergence relation must satisfy suitable reflexivity and transitivity conditions. So any topological space has such a convergence relation with such and these conditions. And likewise, any convergence relation with these conditions has a topology, a unique topology. And the idea to see this as a multi-category essentially is that we have the unit of the monad, which gives us the principal ultrafilters and the flattening of ultrafilters, which is the multiplication of the ultrafilter monad. The reflexivity just tells us that every principal ultrafilter converges to the points, and transitivity says that if we have an ultrafilter converging to a point, and the ultrafilter of ultrafilters it's not quite converging, but it's a relation induced by the ultrafilter monad, and we have this generalized convergence, and it converges to this ultrafilter, then we can flatten the large X ultrafilter, and it must converge to X. So this is kind of a generalized ordered set, and therefore we can conclude that even uncontinuous maps are precisely those that respect this relation, and those will correspond to the functors the sides. So we have an equivalence between topological spaces and these U2 categories. Okay, now the settings for generalized multi-categories. We have the internal case. The context begins with a category V with finite limits, and the Cartesian monad T on V. A Cartesian monad is one that such that T preserves pullbacks, and such that these naturality squares are also pullbacks. So it's a somewhat restrictive notion of a monad. And some examples are for the free monoid monad, an example, and operatic monads are also another example. And internal T-categories were observed by Buroni and Hermida, were defined by them, but they show that T defines a suitable monad on span V, and the category of internal T-categories is given by a suitable notion of Lax algebras, which I'll define later, over T. The enriched counterpart of the setting instead begins with the distributive monoidal category V and a suitable Lax monad T on V mat. People that usually work in the setting of enriched multi-category theory, instead they begin with a monad T on sets, and they Lax extend it to a Lax monad on V mat. This is equivalent because if you have a Lax monad T on V mat, you have an underlying monad on set, and you can simply start out with a suitable Lax monad T on V mat, and that and you can call it a Lax extension of the underlying monad on set. And such enriched T-categories were introduced by Maria-Manuel Clementino and Walter Tollon in 2003. And they constructed these TV categories, which are also given by a suitable notion of Lax algebras over T. And the most general notion that I'm aware of was introduced by Krutwell and Schulman. So they introduced the notion of virtual double categories to achieve this generality. So we let this be the category of virtual double categories, their respective functors, and what I'm going to call the vertical transformations. I believe they just call them, I don't remember what the terminology they use, but because they are, the components are vertical, I'm calling them vertical transformations. And I'm going to say that the setting for generalized multi-categories is just a monad in these two categories. So, for example, in the case of the internal multi-categories, the Cartesian monad T on V induces a monad on span V. Lax monad. It's a strong monad, but it's also lax monad in particular. And in the case that of enriched, multicategories already gave it immediately as a lax monad T on V max. Okay, moving on. Now I'm going to review the notion of horizontal lax algebras that Krugell and Schulman defined. We were going to take a context, so it's just a monad T on a virtual double category V, and what they call a T-monoid, which I'm going to call a horizontal lax algebra. Lax T-algebra is going to be a quadruple, where you have an object of the virtual double category. You're going to have a horizontal morphism, and that's since the reason I call them horizontal lax algebras is because the structure morphism for the algebra goes in the horizontal direction. And this horizontal morphism comes with units to cell, eta, and multiplication to cell mu, which are given by these shapes. So since this is a virtual double category, this is a zero length. This is length 0, and this is length 2. Not quite, it's not a composite, but a list of length 0, list of length 2. And these have to naturally satisfy suitable identity and associativity conditions. This definition recovers both of the internal and enriched cases. If we take V to be span V of a category with finite limits, this object is going to be the underlying object of objects. This horizontal morphism is going to be the underlying span that has the morphisms, and the domain has a shape T, and the codomain has a single object. And this expresses the units and the multiplication, how to perform what are the units and how to compose the T morphisms, and you have the identity and associativity, and likewise for the enriched case, where we have VMATs, a set, you have a matrix here, and these are the same. Okay, and now the problem with change of base is something that Krugell and Schulman left open, and which we found, which was the tool that was missing in our study of descent theory, because we wanted to go from internal multicategories to enriched multicategories, and we were lacking some notion of change of base. So what was a problem that we can, I'm going to print a problem the following way. So we have a two category of virtual double categories, and in the formal theory of monads by Street, he defines monad morphisms. So if we have a monad T on V and S on W, a monad morphism is going to be a functor or a functor of virtual double categories, along with a vertical transformation which satisfies suitable properties. They are not going to be important for the results I'm going to show you. But if you take this data, and if you take a horizontal lax algebra, the natural question is, how do we obtain the horizontal lax S algebra induced by F, correct? So if we take our goal is to obtain a horizontal morphism here, but all we have is a structure morphism A from T of X to X, and but the structure morphism of the algebra and the vertical transformation do not match, and there's no immediate way to recover a horizontal cell that fills in this question mark. So that means that virtual double categories were too general to handle what we wanted to accomplish. Our goal is now to understand how can we flip such a vertical transformation into a horizontal transformation. And for simplicity, because both of our examples were equipments, I'm simply going to assume that we have horizontal composites, and to make it not a little bit easier on the calculations. So first, we have a vertical transformation. We want to understand when can we flip it into a horizontal transformation. That's the first result I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to quickly just remind everyone what's a conjoint companion in case you don't already notice. If you have a pseudodouble category D, a conjoint of a vertical morphism is essentially a right adjoint that is horizontal. So it's kind of a generalization of adjoints to double categories. Essentially, you have all this data. You have a horizontal morphism. You have the unit and co-unit satisfying this triangle identity pretty much. And since the horizontal morphism will be determined uniquely up to a unique isomorphism, we simply write R to be F star, and we say that, and to express that F has a conjoint, we just use the symbol. Analogously, the companions can be defined dually, either by flipping the vertical direction or the horizontal direction. And in that case, we write F exclamation points. Okay, now so we have this. We didn't find this result in the literature, Fernando and I. So we show that if we have pseudodouble categories, D and E, we have another pair of pseudodouble categories where the objects are lax functors. Vertical transformations are precisely the vertical ones. And on the left, we have the lax horizontal transformations. And on the right, we have the oplax horizontal transformations. And we have two pairs of generalized modifications, one in this case and one in this case, as two cells. So we prove this, even though it's elementary. And what's less elementary, or at least not present in the literature, is that is the result I'm going to talk about next. But first, I need to add some more terminology. If we have a pseudo-double category, we say it is conjoint closed if every vertical morphism has a conjoint, and likewise for companion closed. And our result is that if D and E are pseudo-double categories and the codomain is conjoint closed, then this guy is going to be conjoint closed. And if this guy is companion closed, this guy will also be companion closed. So more concretely, what this means is that if E is an equipment, and if we have lax functors F, G from D to E, and a vertical transformation phi, then we are going to have a lax horizontal transformation, which is going to be the conjoint of phi, and an oplax horizontal transformation, which is going to be the companion of phi. Moreover, I'm going to say that phi has a strong conjoint or companion if the respective transformation is strong. It's a strong horizontal transformation. In general, that's going to be far from the case. So it's going to be a strictly lax or strictly oplax transformation. So now we have essentially all the tools that we need to explain the change of phase. So our two category of interest is this one of equipments, lax functors and the vertical transformations. And we are going to let T and S be monads on the respective equipments D and E. we are going to take a monad morphism from T to S, and we are going to assume that phi and T phi have strong conjoints. In practice, T is going to be a strong monad, so this condition will be guaranteed. So in fact, we only need phi to have a strong conjoint. And we are going to let G phi from S to T be a monad of morphism, which has the underlying two cell is flipped in the opposite direction. And we are going to denote by this notation the category of horizontal X algebras and their respective morphisms, or I guess you can call them functors. And the result is that we have these correspondences. So now we are able to fix the vertical to horizontal problem by flipping to the conjoint and flipping to the companion. And we show that these define functors from the horizontal X T-algebras to the horizontal X S-algebras. And vice versa, this one will define from S to T. And now I'm going back to our motivation. So we are going to take V to be a suitable category, and we are going to let T be a Cartesian monad. And the question becomes whether we can obtain an adjunction of the sort using our tools. Naturally, if our input is a Cartesian monad T, here we have to input a monad on VMATs, but it's not instantly clear what the question mark should be. Fortunately, that's not a very difficult problem to solve. We have a T is going to induce a lax monad, so I'm going to let V be suitable, which is like extensive, sure, and D a Cartesian monad on V. And from this adjunction on categories, we have shown that this leads to an adjunction. It will turn out to be an adjunction in equivalent with lax functors. The problem is that this one might be off-lax. But because the coproducts are well behaved with finally, you can distribute over the finite limits, it will turn out that this will be a strong functor. So we have an honest adjunction in these two categories. And moving on, we have a monad T on V, and this one is going to define a monad T on span V. I'm going to call it by the same name. And by composing, by going from VMAT to span T, by applying the monad and returning back to VMAT, we obtain a monad T bar. And this is going to be the lax extension of the underlying monad on sides. So this is the missing input that we needed. And under suitable conditions, because I didn't name them all, but the fact is that we were not able to find a counterexample of a Cartesian monad that did not satisfy them. So I don't think it's important to name the condition. And we obtain an adjunction from enriched T-bar categories to internal T categories. Yeah, so if this functor is moreover fully faithful, then we conclude that this one will also be fully faithful. I was pretty rushed. I must apologize, but this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I thought Bryce was hosting. I got confused. Thank you very much, Rui. That was wonderful. So we have some time for questions now. People can unmute themselves if they like. You can pop your question in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Yes, please, Brianna.
Hi.
Can
Thank
give
you
just a
for your
minute. Sorry to interrupt. Let me give just a minute to raise my sound. Go ahead. Sorry.
thank you for your talk. I'm not too familiar with equipment, so can you just tell me? I don't know if I missed maybe in your.
Yeah, the reason I rushed is because I skipped over many details. An equipment is a pseudo-double category that is both conjoint clause and companion clause. Yeah, it satisfies both of these properties.
But virtual, did you say?
Sorry?
It's the virtual double category, which is
a pseudo-double category D is
just pseudo-double.
Sorry?
Yeah, okay.
If it's conjoint clause and companion clause.
And then you said you had this junction between matrices and spans. So spans, they are closed, and matrices, they are also.
Yeah. They are both equipments, yes. So let me try to find the.
Okay.
Yeah, these guys are both equipments, because if you have a span, if you have a morphism in V, you can take the left leg to be that morphism, the right leg to be the identity. That's one of the, I don't know the direction because I switched them up, but that must be the conjoint. The left arrow is the morphism, the right arrow is the identity. And if you flip the span, you get a companion. Likewise, if you have a matrix, you can take any type function is going to induce a V matrix. And well, it will induce two. One is the transpose of the other, but one is going to be the conjoint and the other is going to be the companion.
Thank you. I think I was confused with the prof because, I see span and I think prof because there a functor goes into the prof functor and then it is also conjoined or companion closed.
Yeah, okay, the same thing. It's analogous. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, anybody else has any questions? Please feel free.
I have a question. Could you go back a couple of slides? So this slide here.
This one. Okay.
So I just want to look at this again. So you have on your assumptions, you asked the monad morphism have these strong conjoints, but the monad morphism doesn't have any extra assumptions. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What's the reason behind this asymmetry here?
It essentially has to do with if you write down the arrows that or the two cells, you're going to see that for the morphism, everything is going to point in the correct direction. But if you take in this case, the monad morphism, you are going to need the underlying two cells that would say that this is the conjoint of phi and the conjoint of t phi that make them lax. You're going to have two cells. Those have to be invertible for you to be even able to define the multiplication.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. I had another question, or maybe two questions. These double categories that you define of lax double functors, and then the two kinds of transformations, and
this one.
Yeah.
Well, this one. Yeah.
Yeah. These two double categories here. Do they have universal properties?
I didn't look into any universal properties, but I imagine they are going to be. I imagine they do have, yes.
Okay.
But I think they are going to be in dimension 3, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not entirely aware of the specific details, but that's what I would expect.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, but I don't want to stop anyone else from asking.
Sorry, let me just add a little bit more onto the answer, because these are pseudodouble categories. They live in a 2 category, and these are going to be essentially a 3-dimensional limit of something else. That's the universal property you're going to get. If you take the time to go through all the calculations, that's hopefully what you'll conclude. You know, obviously, it's not well established yet.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just one final question from me. You said your original motivation was sort of transferring descent theory from the internal setting to the enriched setting.
Correct.
Were you able to do that?
Yes.
With these new results that you've...
Exactly, yes. I was able to, yeah. So the point is that in most cases, to obtain a descent result from a larger category to a smaller one, it's enough for it to be fully faithful and to satisfy some small properties. And these suitable conditions that I mentioned in the end that make it possible to, I didn't mention them, I just left them a star. These suitable conditions will turn out to also help us show that we can simply, if we have a descent problem here, we can just apply the left adjoint, solve the problem here, and we solve the problem here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, provided that this guy is fully faithful, of course.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, then I would like to thank the speaker again. Thank you, Rui.
Thank you.